Chapter 7 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 7. Words and Wisdom. I would find where wisdom is, where peace abides, where truth, majestic, chainless, and eternal, stands untouched by the illusions of the world. For surely there is knowledge, truth, and peace for him who seeks. Thoughts, words, acts, these combine to make up the entire life of every individual. Words and acts are thoughts expressed. We think in words. In the process of thinking, words are stored up in the consciousness, where they await expression and use as occasion may call them forth. Words fit the mind which received them. They are the tally of the intellect which uses them. The meaner the mind, the more meager is the vocabulary. A limited and a capacious intellect alike expresses itself through a limited and an extensive use of words. A great mind expresses itself by the vehicle of flowing and noble language. Words stand for conceptions. Conceptions are embodied in words. At the moment that a conception is formed in the mind, its corresponding word arises in the thought. Conceptions and words cannot be hidden away indefinitely. Sooner or later they will come forth into the outer world of expression. The matter of the universe is in ceaseless circulation. Its hidden things are continuously coming forth into open and visible life. Likewise, the mental operations of men are ever in active circulation, and their hidden thoughts are daily expressing themselves in words and acts. The words and acts of every man are determined by the thoughts in which he habitually dwells. Speech is audible thought. A man reveals himself through his speech. Whether he is pure or impure, foolish or wise, he makes his inner condition known through his speech. The foolish man is known by the way in which he talks. The wise man is known by the purity, gravity, and excellence of his speech. He who would gain a knowledge of men, says Confucius, must first learn to understand the meaning of words. All wise men, saints, and great teachers have declared that the first step in wisdom is to control the tongue. The discipline of speech is a mental disciple. When a man controls his tongue, he controls his mind. When he purifies his speech, he purifies his mind. Speech and mind cannot be separated. They are two aspects of character. A man may read scripture, study religions, and practice mystical arts, but if he allows his tongue to run loosely, he will be as foolish at the end of all his labors as he was at the beginning. A man may not read scripture, nor study religions, nor practice ascetic arts, but if he controls his tongue and studies how to speak wisely and well, he will become wise. Wisdom is perceived in the words which are its expression. We speak of certain men, of Shakespeare for instance, as being wise. We never saw Shakespeare, and we know very little of his life. How then do we know he was wise? By his words only. Where there are wise words, we know there is a wise mind. A foolish man may, like a parrot, repeat wise words, but a wise man frames wise sentences. His wisdom is shown in originally expressed language. Why do men speak of words as being bad or good, degrading or inspiring, low or lofty, weak or strong? Is it not because they unconsciously recognize that words cannot be disassociated from thoughts? Why do pure-minded people avoid a man who habitually uses impure language? Is it not because they know that such words proceed from an unclean mind? It is impossible for any being to give utterance to words which are not already lodged in his mind, fit in the form of thought. The impure mind cannot speak pure words. The pure mind cannot speak impure words. The ignorant cannot speak learnedly, nor the learned ignorantly. The foolish man cannot speak wisely, nor the wise foolishly. Altered speech follows an altered mind. When a man turns from evil to good, his conversation becomes cleansed. As a man increases in wisdom, he watches, modifies, and perfects his speech. If the foolish and the wise are known by their words, what then is the speech of folly, and what is the language of wisdom? A man is foolish if he talks aimlessly and incoherently, if he engages in impure conversations, if he utters falsehood, if he speaks ill of the absent and carries about evil reports concerning others, if he frames flattering words, if he utters violent and abusive words, if his speech is irreverent and his words are directed against the great and good, if he speaks in praise of himself. A man is wise if he talks with purpose and intelligence, if his conversation is chaste, if he utters words of sincerity and truth, if he speaks well of and in defense of the absent, if he speaks words of virtuous reproof, if his speech is gentle and kindly, if he talks reverently of the great and good, if he speaks in praise of others. We are all, now and always, justified and condemned by our words. The law of truth is not held in abeyance, and every day is judgment day. For every idle word which one speaks, he is at once called to account in an immediate and certain loss of happiness and influence. By the words which we habitually utter, we publish to the universe the degree of our intelligence and the standard of our morality, and receive back through them the judgment of the world. The fool thinks he is harshly judged and badly treated by others, not knowing that his real scourge is his own ungoverned tongue. To control the tongue, to discipline the speech, to strive for the use of pure and gentler words, this is a very lowly thing, and one that is much despised, but it cannot be neglected by him who eagerly aspires to walk the way of wisdom. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 8 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 8. Truth Made Manifest. Upon the lofty summits of the truth, where clouds and darkness are not, and where rests eternal splendor, there abiding joy awaits thy coming. Be watchful, fearless, faithful, patient, pure. By earnest meditation sound the depths profound of life, and scale the heights sublime of love and wisdom. Truth is rendered visible through the media of deeds. It is something seen and not heard. Words do not contain the truth, they only symbolize it. Good deeds are the only vessels which contain truth. It has been frequently said that being must precede doing. Being always does precede doing, but being and doing cannot be arbitrarily separated. A man's deeds are the expression of himself. Acts are the language of reality. If a man's inner being is allied to truth, his deeds will speak it forth. If with error, his deeds will make manifest that error. No man can hide what he is. He must necessarily act, and every time he acts, he reveals himself. In the light of reality, no man can deceive humanity or the universe, but he can deceive himself. Deeds of purity, love, gentleness, patience, humility, compassion, and wisdom are truth made manifest. These qualities cannot be contained between the covers of a book, but only the words which refer to them. They are life. Deeds of impurity, hatred, anger, pride, vanity, and folly are error making itself known. A man's deeds are the publication of himself to the world. Truth cannot be comprehended through reading, but only by correcting and converting oneself. Precepts are aids to the acquirement of wisdom, but wisdom is acquired only by practice. If a man would know what measure of truth he possesses, he should ask himself, "What am I? What are my deeds?" Men dispute about words, thinking that truth is heard and read. Truth is neither heard nor read, it is seen. Good deeds are the visible embodiments of truth. They are the messengers of knowledge, angels of wisdom, but the eye of error is dark and cannot see them. End of Chapter 8. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 9 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 9. Spiritual Humility. Who would be the companion of the wise and know the cosmic splendor, he must stoop. Who seeks to stand, must fall who fain would rise. Must know the low ascending to the high. He who would know the great must not disdain to diligently wait upon the small. He wisdom finds who finds humility. Through the sacred scriptures of all religions there runs, like a silver thread, the teachings of humility. Not only all the scriptures, but the sages of all time, have declared that only through the portal of humility is it possible for man to enter into the possession of the life of truth. And as that life is entirely of a spiritual nature, so the humility that leads to it is purely and absolutely spiritual, and being such, it can never be materialized, it can never be embodied in a dogma, or laid down as a formula. It is not an outward thing, nor does it consist of that practice of self-abasement that has usurped its name. But priests have taught, and many have been led to believe, that self-deprecation is true humility, while in reality it is extreme antithesis. Self-deprecation is self-degradation. It is even a sort of self-destruction. It is spiritual suicide. The man who believes that all his righteousness is as filthy rags, that there is no good thing in him, and that he can never rise by any effort of his own, is by that very attitude of his mind rendering himself impotent. He is strangling the spirit. He is undermining and disintegrating all that is highest and noblest in his character. Instead of building up his character, he is engaged in despoiling it. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What our thoughts are, such are our characters. We are in reality beings composed of thoughts. Thoughts are the bricks which we are continually laying down in the building of our souls. If we put a large percentage of rotten bricks into a building, we shall build but a miserable hovel, and every self-deprecating thought is a brick that is already crumbling. It will be found to be a rule, marvelously accurate in its application, that those who continually live in this attitude of self-deprecation are throughout life, or at any rate, until they strike a nobler attitude, wretched failures. I can bring to my mind many such men that I have known. How can it be otherwise? How can a man who has no faith in himself ever win the confidence of others, or accomplish anything worthy? Moreover, such a man cannot possibly have, any faith in human nature. Despising himself, he despises all, and as a result, by the unerring law of cause and effect, all men despise him. Yet it is a strange fact that the men who maintain this faith-destroying attitude of mind invariably profess to have the greatest faith in God, look upon it as an infallible witness to their superior spiritual faith. But I ask this question: does not true faith, like true charity, begin at home? In the growth of the soul, faith in oneself comes first, next faith in human race, and finally faith in God. That faith which professes to have the latter to the exclusion of the two former is false faith. The outcome is fake humility. Another kind of false humility is that of personal abasement to an individual or to an established authority. This is humility materialized or subverted. It is the worship of the Dagon, the bowing of the knee to Baal, the slavish adoration of the golden calf. No man can persist in it without undermining his character and ultimately dissipating his spiritual and mental energies. Humility to man or to any temporal authority is degrading and slavish. Humility to the Most High is grandly beautiful. Spiritual humility is closely allied to faith, and the more there is of humility, the more there is of faith. It is the keynote of all real goodness. In proof of this, I have only to refer to the great sages, saints, and reformers of all time. The greatest of them are those who had the greatest share of spiritual humility. True humility, as distinguished from false, has a strengthening power, an upbuilding force. It inspires and invigorates the soul, spurring it to greater and ever greater endeavor. Of what, then, does this humility consist? Is it the bending of the knee to ask personal favors of the deity? Is it the blind petitioning of God to accomplish for us our petty and narrow designs? Nay, these are its counterfeits. True humility is far above and beyond all this. It is the deepest and holiest aspiration of the human heart, where deep within, hidden from all sacrilegious gaze, it works, a silent mighty power, purifying, transforming, the man of flesh and self. Entering its solitary grandeur, the alienated soul returns to the footstool of its God and bathes in blissful rapture in the light of his all-embracing love. It is a state that can only be entered into by rising above one's lower self. It is, in fact, the submergence of the self in the non-self, the submission of passion and intellect to the Supreme. It is the attitude of a human soul adoring its highest conception. Such humility takes its possessor above all that is mean and poor in his nature, into the very presence of God, making him calm, strong, noble, self-reliant, and godlike. It is the wine of life to all aspiring souls. The soul that has not felt its power is dead. It may sound like a paradox, but is nevertheless true, that the more a man has of humility, the more he has of independence. But the seeming paradox will be made clear if we think for a moment of the lives of such teachers of humility as Jesus, Buddha, Confucius, Socrates, Jacob Boehme, George Fox, and indeed all the great religious reformers. These men walked erect because, yielding themselves up to the simplicity of humility, they walked with God. The humility that causes a man to go, metaphorically speaking, on all fours is spurious, and is as debasing and destructive as the real humility is elevating and strengthening. Why should we go amongst our fellows like cringing, fearful beasts, calling ourselves miserable sinners? Shall we ever rise above sin by so doing? Is it possible to rise by ceaselessly contemplating our absolute unworthiness? No, we can only rise by continually contemplating the highest. There may be much that is unworthy in a man's heart, but there is also a sacredness, a dignity, a divinity about it, Let us dwell upon that. Let us continually contemplate the goodness, the purity, and the essential beauty of human nature. Let us ceaselessly search for the divinity in our own souls, and finding it through the door of humility, we shall then recognize the invisible God in all men. By so doing, we rise above the binding limitations of our selfish desires and enter the larger, healthier, holier life of love. End of Chapter 9. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 10 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 10. Spiritual Strength. All things are holy to the holy mind. All uses are legitimate and pure. All occupations blessed and sanctified, and every day a Sabbath. A clear and firm head must precede and accompany a clear and gentle heart. Without the first, the second is impossible, for the qualities of purity and gentleness can only be reached through a clear perception of right and wrong, and by the exercise of an irresistible will. The strength of a powerful animal, or of that animal force in man, which enables him to gain the victory over others by attack and resistance, is weakness compared with that quiet, patient, invincible will by which a man overcomes himself and tames to obedience and trains to the service of holy purposes the savage passions of his nature. Every dog can bark and fight, and every foolish man can rail, abuse, fence with hard words, and give way to fits of bad temper. These things are easy and natural to him, and require no effort and no strength. But the wise man puts away all such follies, and trains himself in self-control, trains himself to act unerringly from fixed principles, and not from the fleeting impulses of an unstable nature. He who succeeds in so training himself is able to train others, in a small degree by precept, but largely and chiefly by practice or example. For it is preeminently the prerogative of the wise to teach by their actions. The mockeries of Herod, the accusations of Thai people, and the fanatical persecutions of the priests have all failed to draw from Jesus the word of complaint, bitterness, or self-defense. Such sublime acts of silence and self-control continue to reach, for ages, both individuals and nations, with far greater power and effect than all the words and books uttered and written by the world's vast army of priests and learned commentators. To retaliate and fight belongs to the animal in man, as it belongs to the beast of the forest. But to refuse to be swayed from the practice of a divine principle by any external pressure, to stand firm and unalterable in goodness and truth alike amid blame and praise, this belongs to the divine in man and in the universe. To alter one's conduct in order to please others, or to avoid their censure or misunderstanding, can never lead to spiritual strength. That divine kindness, which always accompanies spiritual understanding and strength, is something very different from merely saying pleasant words. For pleasant words are not always true words, but consist in doing what is best for the eternal welfare of the other person or persons. The weak father who is unfit to train children only considers how he can escape trouble with his children, and so he slurs over their acts of disobedience and selfishness and tries to please them. But the strong father, who considers the future character and welfare of his children, knows how and when to administer a severe reproof, fully understanding that a few minutes' pain caused by his rebuke may save his child from years of suffering as a result of loose living which is fostered by parental neglect. The strong, kind, unselfish father, whose care is for his children's good and not for his own immediate comfort, knows not only how to be tender in affection, but tender in discipline, knows how to stretch out the strong and severe arm of restraint to save his little ones when they would ignorantly wander away in wrong paths. So the man of spiritual strength cannot be merely a weak framer of smooth words, but a doer of right actions, an utterer of words that are vital and true, and therefore eternally kind. The spiritually weak man shrinks from right when it is brought, as by its nature it must be brought, in opposition to his desires, and he embraces sin because it is pleasant. The spiritually strong man shrinks from sin, more especially when it is presented to him in a pleasant garb, and embraces right, even though by so doing he will bring upon himself the odium of those who are ignorant of divine principles and their beneficent application. The man of spiritual understanding is as unbending as a bar of steel where right is concerned, knowing that right alone is good. He is as unresisting as water where self is concerned, knowing that self alone is evil, acting from imperishable principles and not from the fleeting desires of self. His actions partake of the imperishable nature of the principles from which they spring, and continue to afford instruction and inspiration through unnumbered generations. It is always the portion of one who so acts to be misunderstood. The majority live in their desires and impulses, following them blindly as they are brought into operation by external stimuli, and do not understand what is meant by acting dispassionately from right and fixed principles, with entire freedom from self-interest. Such will necessarily misunderstand and misjudge the right doer, regarding him as cold and cruel in his unbearing adherence to right, or as weak, cowardly in his quiet refusal to passionately defend himself. He will therefore be accused of many things, but this will not cause him any suffering, nor will he be troubled or disturbed thereby, for the truth which he practices is a source of perpetual joy, and he will be at rest in the knowledge that there are those who will understand and follow, that he is working for the ultimate good even of his accusers, and that by manifesting the truth in his daily actions, he is in the company of those divinely strong ones who are leading the world into ways of quietness and peace. End of Chapter 10. Recording by Andrea Fiore. www.andreafiore.name. End of The Shining Gateway by James Allen.